Hi, in this video I'm going to show you how to build a simple appointment scheduling system with Blaze. This example project is built with healthcare industry in mind, but you can easily customize it to fit your own business. Okay, let's start by creating a new project. I'm going to call mine tutorial project. You can select a background color and an icon, of course. Hit apply, and once you see your project created, click on the tile. This will take you to the app editor. As you can see, we have a blank canvas. This is where our app UI is going to be built. And on the left-hand side, you have our components menu. These are the building blocks that we'll be using to build our UI. Before we do, let's go to the data connectors. Let's set up our database. So we're going to be using Blaze tables today. So we want to build our own database directly in Blaze. Let's unfold and let's start building. The first table I'll need is one for patients. I'll call it patients. And now I'm going to add a couple of different columns or fields to store my patient data. So the first one created by default, name, is fine. That's exactly what we need. Then I'm going to add one for address, and I want this to be a text field type. Hit add. Next, I want to have the date of birth. For this one, I want to change the field type to date and time, but I actually just need the date. I don't really need the time. So I can just switch to this option and then click add. Next, I want to add one for medical conditions. And for simplicity, I'm just going to keep it as a text field. You can also take advantage of options, right? So you can define different conditions to choose from. You can also link to another table, so you can create your own table for medical conditions, etc. But like I said, for now, we just need the text field. This is fine. And lastly, let's create one for medical history. So this is going to be my sort of notes section. And I'm actually going to change the format of this one to paragraph. And this is just because I'm anticipating to have a lot of text in some of these. Okay, hit add. And now we can add a couple of examples. I actually have something prepared beforehand, so I'm just going to import mine from CSV. And then we can move on to our next table. Okay, we have some sample patients to work with. That's perfect. Now let's close this table. Let's head over to our Blaze tables again, and let's add another one for our doctors this time. And again, we just need a name column, and we could add more, of course, but for the sake of this tutorial, I'm just going to stick with the name. Let's add some example doctors. Okay, I think 3 is enough. We can close this table. Now, I said we are going to be building an appointment scheduling system. So the next table we'll need is actually one for appointments. So let's call this one appointments. Now, we don't really need the name column, so we can change this one. I'm going to click edit fields, and what we'll need for the appointment is 2 links. We'll need to link to the patient table, right? Because we need to know which patient this is for. As you can see, we have the address column as a sort of default display column. So we actually want to change that. Let's just save this column for now. Let's go back to our patients table. And you can see this little blue asterisk next to the address. That's not what we want. This is the display column, and I think the name is more suitable for that purpose. So let's click here and then set this column as display column. And you can see the blue asterisk has moved to the name. All right, let's head back to our appointments. Now let's edit this field again. And now we can see the name is the unique identifier from that table, which is exactly what we need. And now we can rename this field to something like patient. Now we need another similar column for the doctor. So let's create one, call it doctor. Select the link type, link it to the doctor's table. Hit required because we actually want every appointment to be linked to a doctor. Hit add. And now let's add 2 more columns. and these are going to be the start time and end time respectively. So for this one, I want to use the date and time field type, but I actually want to keep the date and time format because we want to schedule these at a certain hour during the day. All right. We can make it required as well, hit add, and then the other one is the end time of the appointment. All right, and that's pretty much it. That's all we need. So now we can close this table, and now we can start playing around with our app layout. So let's go back to our components, and let's start by creating a sidebar with some navigation menu. So scroll down to the navigation section, use the navigation sidebar, click on it, drag and drop it, and put it somewhere on the canvas. All right, so now you can see we have this sidebar here. When I hover my mouse, it gets highlighted. So now if I click on it, I can make it a little wider, change the color of it, etc. So for this tutorial, I'm actually going to use the drop shadow effect to sort of differentiate the sidebar from the main body of the app. And I'll click on these more, on this more icon, and I'll play around with the parameters of my drop shadow to make it look better. So now it kind of blurs to the right? So you can see it kind of cuts off from the main body this way. Of course, you can customize the style according to your own preferences. This is just a quick example. And next, I want to drag and drop this image component, and I want to put my logo in here. So in the properties window for the image component, I want to click upload, and I'm going to upload my sample image as my logo. Okay, and once the image loads, we can play around with the image behavior. I want this one to fit. You can change the size, etc. And actually, I want to have some sort of padding around the image. So in order to achieve that, I can click on my sidebar, and in the sidebar's own properties, I can change the padding here from 0 pixels to something like, say, 16 pixels. And you can see it now added this extra padding around the logo. Okay, that's exactly what I needed. And then I want to put a navigation menu in there. So again, drag and drop it onto the canvas. Maybe we want to make the sidebar slightly bigger. Okay, I think that's enough. And now we want to make sure that the navigation stretches all the way to where the padding ends. Okay, the navigation menu has some predefined items for us, so we get the idea of what the menu could look like, but we actually don't need some of these, so I'm just going to delete the second one and now rename the first one to calendar. And I'm going to add 2 more pages for the sake of this tutorial. We'll just have 3 simple pages. I'll call one patient and another one for the doctors. Okay, and now let's go ahead and actually create those pages. So I'm just going to duplicate the home page, right? So go to the 4th icon here on the left to go to pages, and we already have this default page created for us, and I'm just going to click on this more icon and just duplicate it twice. Rename the second one to patients, the third one to doctors, and the first one I actually want to rename from home to calendar so it matches my navigation menu. Okay, right, so now we have these pages created. So if I click through them, you can see that the page loads, but they're actually all the same. So now let's go ahead and link our navigation menu to these pages so it actually navigates around. So click on the navigation menu again. It doesn't really matter which page you're on, it still applies to all of them. So click on the navigation menu component and then go to the menu section here. And then again, for each of these items, you want to go to edit and change the behavior on click to go to page and select the right page. So calendar in this case, and then patients in this case. And finally for doctors, we want to go to page doctors. Okay, and now if I click on these items in the menu, you can see we are actually navigating around, and the little blue line indicates which item is currently selected. Of course, we can play around with the styling of the menu, right? So if I click on that navigation menu component, I go to style. Let's say I want a background color to just be white so it matches my application background, right? So you can play around with these any way you want. And now let's go ahead and create our patient page. So I'm going to drop actually before I drop the table component, let's put an empty container here on the main page, and I'm going to explain to you why this is a better idea. If you have an empty container, it's very easy to add custom padding, right? So let's say you want to have some sort of padding like we did for the sidebar. So this way, all of your components like tables, etc., automatically have this padding around them, and it doesn't stretch awkwardly all the way to the end of the page where it's not super visible to the end user. So now we have this empty container. We can drag and drop a table inside of it, and you can see it has this extra padding now around it, which I think looks better, helps it, pop. Now for this table, click on that component, and we want to select the data source. So click on that drop down here at the top and select patients, since we're building the patients page. And you can see the table populates with my data from my Blaze table. Now let's scroll a little bit down. I want to make sure the width of my table extends fully till the end of the container. And if I click away, you can see that now it has this padding, so I think it looks nice. It fits on the page, and it doesn't stretch awkwardly all the way to the end of your screen. All right, so if I click on my component again, I can customize the way it looks. I can customize all the different elements of it, right? So one of the things I want to add is some functionality. So let's scroll down to the actions. So first of all, let's make sure we can add more patients to the system from the UI. So let's enable the add new row. You can see this creates this little plus button, and we can add a label to it. Let's call this one add patient. Make sure you can spell correctly, of course. And now we have this add patient button. So if I click on it, this will bring up this dialog, and you can fill out this information to create your new patient. So the save button, I can just trigger it from the editor, and you can see we have a new record added in our table here. Okay, so it's that simple really. You don't really need to customize the workflow. You don't need to code anything. The functionality is already there, so you can easily enable it here from the properties, and your end users will now be able to add new records to your table. We can also add a view details functionality. So now users will be able to actually see the details of your newly created records, right? So if I click on this little icon here, this will take me to another page where I have all the patient's information. But let's say I don't want the app to navigate away to a different page. I don't want to build a separate page for this. I just want it to be a dialog. We can easily achieve that. So let's head back to our patients page. We can use this drop down at the top in the editor to navigate around pages. So what I'm going to do now is I'll just change this page to a dialog. So in order to achieve that, I need to go to my Pages tab. And here where it says data forms and views, here you have your automatically generated views, right? So this view patient details is one of them. So you can see we have the patients folder. If I unfold it here, I have some dialogues and pages automatically generated for me. So one of them is the add patient form that was generated for this button up here, and the view patient that was generated by this eye icon. So if I click on the more icon here, one of the options is convert to dialogue, and that's exactly what I want to click. So now you can see the icon here changes, and now this is no longer a separate page, but rather a dialogue. So if I click on this icon again, it now gives me this pop-up dialogue instead, right? So you don't have to navigate away, you stay on the same page, you just get a little dialogue with the details here. And this is useful if you have more than these 5 columns, right? So let's say in the table you just want to show the 4 or 5 most relevant columns, but then you have more fields that should be hidden so they don't clutter this table. You can view all of them if you go to this eye icon, and this way you don't clutter your main table. Okay, let's click on the table components, and in our properties window, I want to enable edit row as well, and I want to enable the delete row. So this way we can now edit this row, we can edit this patient's information, and we can also delete a patient easily with just a few clicks, right? So let's delete this new test record that we added earlier. All right, and for the actions, you can also play around with how they're shown in the table. So they can always be visible, like so. You can also have them collapsed, so they create an unfoldable menu. Or they can also disappear completely and only appear on hover when you're hovering over a particular row. Okay, all right. So this is our patients table. Let's quickly create a similar one for the doctors. Actually, before we do that, let's again create an empty container so it's easier to add padding for all the elements inside of it. Put a table inside, select this one to be doctors. Let's stretch this one all the way to the end. Add a button to enable users to add more records. Let's have an edit and delete. We don't really need the view details for this one. There isn't really that many details that we keep track of at the moment. So I think this should be fine. One side note, these dialogues are also fully customizable. So if I click somewhere in here, you can see I get this properties window for the form. So I can also play around with the padding, the colors. I can change the success message after a user hits save. I can change the label here at the top. You can really customize it to fit your own needs. Okay, and then the last thing we want to build is the actual scheduling system. So let's go back to our first page, to the calendar page. I'm going to again put an empty container, change the padding to 16. And now I can put a calendar feature inside of it. So scroll down to our advanced component and use the calendar component. Okay, I'm just going to stretch this one to the end of the container. Okay, and here for our events data source, we want to select the appointments table that we created earlier. Okay, and now let's say we want to browse, we want to be able to filter this calendar based on the doctors. So in my calendar dropdown, I'm going to select doctors, and you can see that I now have our available doctors here on the left, so I can choose between different doctors. At the moment, we have the day view selected, so you can see that the calendar, this agenda is only showing one particular day. But I think for our purposes, the view week mode is more appropriate. So we can change it here, or we can also change it here. So the default when a new user opens the app for the first time is the week view, but they can always switch between day and week on their own in the UI. Okay, we can customize this calendar to fit our needs. So we can change it to always start on a Sunday, for example. We can change the default duration of an appointment to say 30 minutes. You can change the date format, all these different things here. For the working hours, for example, let's say our facility opens at 9 and it closes at 6 p.m. So the calendar actually doesn't go any earlier or any later than these hours. Okay, and now for the title, let's select the patient. So the patient's name will be shown as the title of the card when we add a new appointment to the system. So now let's go ahead to our actions and let's enable some functionality. So I want to be able to add new appointments, maybe edit existing ones and delete appointments as well. Okay, all right, so now if I hover over, you can see there's a little darker gray background, and there's also this plus icon. So you can either click on the plus to bring up the add appointments menu, or you can also click on a specific time slot. Say you want to schedule one for Wednesday at 11. So you just click here, and this gives you this dialog, and the start and end time are automatically selected for you. You can of course customize them, but they are based on your selection in the actual visual component. And you can select which patient this is for, which doctor will be taking care of this appointment. And if we save, you can see a new card is created. At the moment it's a little small, so actually let me go ahead and delete this one, and let's just change it to 60 minutes just so you can see the blocks a little better. Okay, we have them selected here. Let me just refresh the page so we get the updated backdrop. There we go. Okay, so now let's schedule one for Wednesday at 11. Select the patient, doctor. Okay, and now you can see we have this block here, but the title is a little iffy. It says object, and this is because for our title, we actually selected the patient property, which is a link to another database. So if I go back to my appointments, you may notice that this patient field is actually a link that links to an entire object, which is this patient, and it comes with their own fields. So what we want to do instead is have one extra field that just copies the name of the patient for the sake of the display functionality in the calendar. So what I'll do is I'll add a new field here, call it patient's name, and I'll use the formula field. And for my formula, I just want to reference the patient field, and the system will recognize that we just want to copy the name from this field, right? So now this is a text string, and if I go back to my calendar, now in the title dropdown, I can just select the patient's name, and this will now change to the actual name, so it looks much better. Okay, and if we wanted to add another appointment here and select a different doctor, you'll notice that these blocks are actually color-coded and they correspond to these colors here. So we can easily see which doctor has which appointments scheduled, right? So you can easily recognize them. And like I mentioned earlier, you can always unselect some of these if you want to just look at a particular doctor, or you can select all of them. You can always change the label here, so instead of available calendars, it says something like doctors, for example, etc. Okay, and this way you can have a fully functional appointment system. So you can schedule appointments. If you click on a block, there's a little pencil icon. You can edit an existing appointment. You can delete one. And at a quick glance, you can see who has some available time slots for your patients. All right, thank you very much for watching.